everyone. Thank you for being with us today. It's an honor to introduce our next speaker, whose career reflects both professional excellence and deep commitment for arts and culture. Christopher Springham has led an impressive career in the fields of global consultancy and investment, advising leading firms on strategies for achieving carbon neutrality, and hosting the Responsible Investment Forum in London for 3 consecutive years. At the same time, he has been a dedicated art collector for over 40 years. Based between Amsterdam and London, his collection features some of the most celebrated artists of our time, names like Ai Weiwei, Banksy, Barbara Hepworth, Damien Hirst, and Juan Miró, while also championing new and emerging voices. We would like to thank the State Institute for Culture at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Bulgaria for their generous support, which allows us the privilege of hearing Christopher's collector story today as part of our SAF Talks program. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to our speaker, Christopher Springham.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you very much indeed for, first of all, for my warm welcome to Bulgaria, and secondly, for the warm personal welcome I've enjoyed from Snezana and the Institute, and from Nia from the Institute. And I will try my best to respond to this Bulgarian welcome by speaking slowly in English, if that's all right with you. I was first asked to speak about my business career, which, as it all happened to me, is rather dull. So I'm going to do all of that in pictures, if that's all right. It's quite a deep treasure chest, because in that there are a lot of stories about acquiring art and artists. Then I've been asked to talk a little bit about the business relationship with art. I'm not going to spend hours on that. There's a lot of information around about it in the public domain where I've written and spoken on this. You can find a speech that I did in February at Oxford University Said Business School, which devotes itself specifically to the topic of art, business, and sustainability, which is my current field of operation. The other thing that I know I must deal with is this topic of the unbearable passion of collecting. Now, why would passion and art be unbearable? Well, if you've collected art for as long as I have, I'm afraid it has many, many highs. Those of you who sell art in the room know the wonderful dopamine rush of receiving that payment and saying goodbye to an artist you love, giving it to a new friend. But there are many, many occasions when that doesn't quite work out. And hopefully I can show you some of those stories, and you can share those ups and downs with me. This opening slide actually reflects a beautiful Amsterdam gallery where a fantastic show has just finished after 4 amazing summer months, during which it was packed with visitors. Some of them were very, very important dignitaries in small groups, and some very large groups. But what was characteristic about the visitors was they were not all art people. It was featuring the gallery's works in conversation with about 30 works from my collection. And these conversations were real, and they evolved over time. The gallery was the Merchant House. It's run by a Russian gallerist and curator, Masha Plotsnitsky, and I worked with the co-curator, Anastasia Nefedova. I was asked to present that show a lot to lots of different people, and I discovered there is a communication problem for art. And I had to find new ways to address that. Some people, visitors to galleries in particular, are scared of art. They're scared of the highbrow atmosphere around art. They're put off by the long words they read on captions. And some of those captions are very poorly explained. There's one particular experience which involves entering an art gallery which is not very busy and hearing the sound of your own shoes as you walk in. At the end of the room is often some very either well-suited gentleman or beautifully dressed young woman staring at you, and the question you think they're asking you is, any chance whatsoever? How fat's the wallet? And do you know what they really want to ask me is, what have you got? Because I might have just the thing for you. It's a tense exchange. Perhaps some of the stories I tell at the end of the show will help you to manage that engagement differently and think a little bit more about how we see the art experience from a potential customer's point of view. This piece that you see on the left is called Fire Fountain. It's a screen print on paper, workshop proof, by the brilliant American pop giant James Rosenquist. It had to go in the stairwell of the gallery because it's outrageously powerful. And so it dominates everything around it. And now it's back in my house and it dominates everything around there too. But I do love it. So this is giving tours in the gallery during the summer months. And this is one of the crowds. This is the Black Wall. And at one end of the Black Wall, you'll see the first piece I ever bought. It's by Robert Motherwell. It's a riff on jazz music. It's particularly on the music of John Coltrane and Miles Davis. And next to it in the middle, another huge Motherwell. That's called Black Sounds, and that's also related to jazz music. And on the far right, one of my earliest and most treasured pieces, a fantastic early Robert Rauschenberg print. Everything that ever happened in the world of printing, in contemporary prints as we know it, happened on that lithographic stone with Robert Rauschenberg and Bob Goldston, who printed it at ULAE. So how could I get this thing to you about unbearable passion? Well, I just want you to know that just like the picture, I think art itself has a jagged heart. If you had a relationship with it, you will have something equivalent to a love affair. It will be sweet and birds will sing, and then there will be days when the sun does not shine. So I have to do my life and career. I'll do it really quickly. I was born near London when dinosaurs ruled the earth. There were no mobile telephones. There was no internet. It means that I was around to hear the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Jimi Hendrix, David Bowie. And then as I reached my art school years, we got to the Sex Pistols, the Clash, the Jam. Those were my art school soundtracks. And I think a characteristic of my collecting career is that I have a vastly overdeveloped sense of hero worship. So these are the people that I wanted to hang out with. These are the people when I stared at album covers. That's a vinyl for anybody under 30 here. When I stared at album covers, I occupied this fantasy world of one day leading a rock and roll lifestyle and being among wonderful arty people. My dad was a painter. I can't remember ever going to a gallery with him, but he was pretty competent. This is one of his marine landscapes. I really like it, and they still sell. But I really never had a conversation with him about art, actually. I went to Leeds University after art college in the north of England and read a Bachelor of Arts degree in fine art. And then I was lucky enough to somehow score 2 semesters off the American government to go and study in Paris at l'École des Beaux-Arts, studying sculpture. But I am also by nature an entrepreneur, and I have been throughout my life. And before I finished the course, I set up a magazine. The magazine was called Rendezvous. It featured fashion, arts, and music. I now look at it and I realize that at the time it was very hip, and actually now it's hip again. How the world goes round and round. My younger friends really loved the fashion in it and the fact that we had so much access to artists and bands. It turned out to be my first lesson in business. because I lost pretty much everything I didn't have, and I spent most of my 20s paying it back. I started to become a hack copywriter, writing for business newspapers and really writing anything I could get to write. I think a lot of people in that world now are content developers, but we really didn't have an environment which meant content in those days. But I was really, really fortunate to be picked up by some guy from Mobil Oil who hired me as an advertising copywriter, and over the coming years, they developed my career in a huge way. I started writing these kinds of ads for Formula One, and can you imagine, I'm a 24-year-old guy. I've got no money to speak of. I can't make the rent. And the guy says, look, we'll have to hire you. You've got to go to all these Grand Prix circuits all around Europe, put stickers on a racing car. You know, you can stay for lunch and, you know, let us know how it goes. I mean, that was the depth of my analytical requirements for the job, and it was a pretty good job. But it got tougher. I can't deny that I loved it. But they, of course, one of the things about big companies, particularly in the 80s and early 90s, was they really invested in you. So I got to do everything: internal communications, external communications, brand development, government relations, community relations. And the oil companies regarded themselves a little bit like the Medici in expensive suits. They invested really heavily in the arts. So whether it was theatre or particularly theatre in Mobil's case, but they also sponsored museums and galleries and artists and commissioned art. They had a fantastic art collection, which I really was the first chance I had to see contemporary prints in their living environment. So they sent me around the world, and they sent me offshore. And here I am. You can obviously see there's been some years that have passed, but this is me trying to put on a macho look because I'm on an oil rig, and I'm trying to pretend that I know which end of a spanner to hold with all my colleagues. It was quite an experience. I was obviously quite good at building brands, and I was good at the political relations part of it. And we ended up having to meet and greet various dignitaries. This is another younger man with much more hair than me, meeting the infamous Margaret Thatcher. This is an arts platform, so I will make no remarks about Margaret Thatcher. But anyway, she seems pleased to meet me. That's the best thing. And then I got sent to New York. I got promoted to the headquarters, and suddenly I'm on 42nd Street. I was 31. And it was like a theatre of my dreams. New York in the autumn. I even met Mel Torme, who sang "Autumn in New York" as I walked along the streets. And everywhere I looked were my heroes pointing out at me from gallery windows and from, this is Chase Manhattan Bank. That's a Frank Stella. Frank Stella's a massive hero of mine. But I just want you to take your eyes off the Stella for a minute. That's the janitor. Right? That's how big that Stella is. And I can suddenly say that I'm hanging out with Frank. So I went to everything. I went to MoMA. I went to every gallery I could find. I sat there drinking a single glass of wine at the Met and dreaming of greater things. But Warhol, Lichtenstein, Rauschenberg, Stella, Johns, Dines, Sultan, Rosenquist, Motherwell, Pollock, Serra, I was actually among them, or it felt that way. I moved to Washington, D.C. to head up the political communications for the company, and then when the second Clinton administration came in, they hired me to join them at the White House to make announcements about international trade. And here's, again, this young man at the White House. If you look at the current spokesman at the White House, it's a female, and I won't say anything about that either, but just from a presentation point of view, she looks like she's in a palace. I mean, it's been beautifully renovated. This is actually a dirty blue curtain and a very rough lectern, but that's how it was. They really hadn't got the hang of the press, actually, in that administration. Very, very rapidly, I moved on. I became a director of Rolls-Royce, and I liked going to Rolls-Royce. I was sort of feeling uncomfortable in the oil industry a little. At Rolls-Royce, it was the first time I came across a brand which is actually an adjective. So, would you like your suit cleaned at the corner street dry cleaners, sir, or would you like the Rolls-Royce service? And I couldn't understand what that difference was. So where's the price premium in a name? So it was a great brand opportunity for me. And that discomfort with the oil industry really started to hit home, partly because climate change was beginning to surface as a global concern. I was a father of two very little daughters, and I started wondering about what kind of world they were going to grow up into. And my politics was evolving too, and politics is highly influential in a career, I think. I started to move greener, and I started to move somewhat lefter. And that too meant that I was more engaged in British politics after Rolls-Royce. I became a lobbyist, working with lots of different companies in different sectors, and I soon learned that politics was never going to be a career I would wish to enter because I like to say what I think. So, how did this suddenly evolve into back into entrepreneurialism? It was the green economy. There are now thousands and thousands of jobs in the green economy which didn't exist at the beginning of the century, and the wind industry is one of those sectors. I was hired by a group of investors to go and develop a wind energy company. And we built factories in China, India, the United States, Canada, all over Europe. And it was obviously the first time that I actually had a seat at the boardroom table. And I thought it was quite funny. We always use this thing, oh, I've got a seat at the boardroom table. That's actually the boardroom table, which I had a seat at. Every Monday for endless hours, I would sit there listening to very bad presentations. But being there and working on creating a new industry with a new vision was frankly a humbling and fantastic experience. We had big shows, a bit like this one, where we would present our new products, and this picture on the right is one of the factories where we made those enormous blades that generate the clean green electricity. So I moved forward through Rolls-Royce with a pretty swift trajectory. The company was massively successful. We built the world's longest blade for the world's largest wind turbine, which powers 20,000 houses just with one machine. The wind industry is a miracle of invention. And we also started sponsoring the arts. And so wherever we went, wherever we were investing in a new factory or a new community, we would try to give opportunities to local artists to participate and to share in the development of their area. And I'm a little proud of this picture because this is a wonderful Indian dance troupe with also original, authentic Indian musicians from the local community in Vadodara, where we were. And they're dancing in front of the vision, which I helped to write. Together, we captured the wind to power a cleaner world. And we lived up to that reputation because we were finally bought by our biggest customer, GE, for $1.7 billion. Cha-ching. It was a happy day, and I, for some reason, was, I think, bribed somewhat to stay on in GE, which I did, and I ended up going away from the beautiful world I'd created of business and art and business and sponsorship. This is the last scene from that story. This is a place in Rotterdam. It's where the ferry comes in by the famous Erasmus Bridge. And you'll notice the people are sitting on some rather peculiar street furniture. But they're actually decorated and represented to the public by an artist called Mr. June. And I found them the recycled wind turbine blades. And now this whole area, which was a bit deserted and a bit windy and a bit cold, is full of skaters and people having their lunch and hanging out. And it's just a very important message I wanted to share with the audience about how art can create a sense of place that didn't previously exist. But I had to go back to work, and here's where I ended up. This is the sort of the end of my formal business career. I'm standing by the desk of a guy called Thomas Edison, who you probably have all heard of. He invented the light bulb. That's actually him. That's me. And on the desk is actually the light bulb. That's the one. And I sort of admired Edison. I was not happy to be back in the American corporate world, but I noticed that he was an entrepreneur. And I could go to work in his company after 100 years after its foundation as an entrepreneur again, which I did. But finally we parted company, and I decided that I would take a breath. We had lockdown, COVID. During that breath, I did a postgraduate course in digital publishing. And I still now have a very busy commercial career. I'm chairman of an annual conference for investors who only invest their money in environmentally and socially responsible businesses. We're the largest fund of its kind in the world, $55 trillion. If you, that was last year, it's probably higher now. If you believe all the rhetoric you hear around disinvestment and every drill, baby, drill, you may have heard somebody say that. But actually, the private capital is flooding away from this because many, many people don't want their pensions in companies that make military things or drill for fossil fuels or make cigarettes for babies. I don't know what they do, but people like to put their money somewhere where it's making a difference in the world. And I work with young entrepreneurs, which I find very exciting, and everything that you want to know about any of that is on this is on this strange platform, LinkedIn. So if you don't need to do it now, but if you want to find me on LinkedIn, I would love to have more Bulgarian friends, and you're extremely welcome to contact me for any activity that you're doing. But I started to notice when I had a bit more time that I had a lot of works that I'd acquired over that time, a lot of artwork from my travels and my slowly investing in art over that period. And with all the moves, quite a lot of the documentation had got lost. And after my course, I met a young curator who fell just as much in love with the works as I was, and we formed a joyful partnership, making the whole show presentable and professional. And I was offering tours and talks at my home in Amsterdam. I haven't yet done it in London, but if you're in London, simply ask, you're very welcome. I can even make you a cup of coffee, and we can go around and see the works there. And the visitors were wonderful and intelligent and curious and enthusiastic art people. They started to call me a collector, and I'd never imagined myself that way. Then something really weird happened. After we launched the gallery, the Bridge Gallery here, you just scan the QR code, you enter it, you press on the picture, and you're in this fantastic world of 100 and something artworks. I think there's maybe 100 there now, not quite. And you can see them all in a room, just like we can see the works upstairs, and you can wander around. And I wrote a story by each one about how I got it. And you click on the eye, and it tells the whole story. So while all of this was going on and I was reflecting on what I should do with the rest of my fortunate life, I was running home from the park. I'm quite a keen runner, and I fell off the pavement. And when I fell off the pavement, I broke 3 bones in my right foot and my ankle. Ouch. I couldn't get anywhere. I couldn't walk more than 500 meters. I'd never been so constrained in my life. I'd gone from 200 flights a year, 200 flights a year, 52 weeks in the year. Imagine, India to Brazil, Brazil to China, China to America. Incredible thing, to 500 meters. I don't know, some of you maybe have a dog. Does anybody have a dog in their lives? Any hands? Yes, some dogs, yeah. So I felt like that dog you see when you go to the supermarket and its owner is inside the supermarket and it's like outside with its paws looking at you, saying, nobody loves me and I can't go anywhere. And I was so bored. I have never been bored in my life. my daughter said to me, design and make a toy which tells stories about art. And so, for some reason, I did. I'd like to introduce you my friend Wonky. Hello, Wonky. Hi, Wonks. Hang on. Get your tail right. People are looking, you know. Don't sit like that. Be nice. Hang on, sorry. Yes, a bit more decent. Yes, that's a bit more decent. Hi. Say hi. Hi. Right, now you can find Wonky all over Instagram. Oh dear, he's not going to cross his legs, never mind. I was going around the corner every day to meet hundreds of visitors at the art gallery, and it would come back to me that in the art gallery, a lot of people weren't asking me any questions about art. And they were very, very cautious. They thought it was a very serious place. And I didn't even think they were enjoying the art that much. I once took Wonky there to do some photographs for his amazing Instagram account. The details will be at the end of the show. And I realized that people were actually talking to Wonky and not to me. They'd say, hi, what do you think of that? And I'd be standing there like a fool. So people were somehow using Wonky to break the glass screen between them and the wall, this artificial place that seems to exist in art galleries, a place where we fear we're not allowed to touch, we can't get too close, beep, beep. Every time you look around the side of a Vermeer, beep. It's a strange place. And obviously, because artworks are the stock in trade of all these wonderful people in the room, you can't touch. So there's a sense, in a way, that we must always revere the object, and some of that pushes people away. I did promise I'd talk to you about the business of art. So the second part of the talk will be shorter, but I think it's, I hope, of value to you. I'll put that stuff up at the end so you can see it. That's my heavy boot, by the way, that I had to wear for 9 weeks. I was walking about like this for 9 weeks. And this is where the Wonky brand came from. And obviously the word Wonky comes from my beautiful needlework, because I didn't only draw him, I actually cut him out and I made him. He's stuffed with all the airline socks I had collected from my 200 flights a year. Okay, I'm not going to do a lot of slides with this. I want to make some general points. And I did mention that talk I gave at Oxford in February. It's on YouTube. It's all there for you. Okay. Yesterday I had a great conversation. I was at the Cultural Institute with my hosts, and we were trying to just reflect a little bit on why we can't get an accurate number for what the contribution of the creative industries are to GDP in any different country. Now, in the UK, we have a really weak survey annually, which includes all sorts of things that may or may not be in there. So, you know, with the birth of online, there are loads and loads of parts of the economy going on which could be creative, but there might be other things as well. You know, music is a very, very broad sphere. Theatre is a very, very broad sphere. Art and art galleries, it's themselves, all the shows. Very difficult to make a calculation, decide what you should do, but the national figure, and I live in the same building as the guy in the Treasury who does the sum, so I asked him in the lift, is 6.7% of UK GDP, which, you know, is a significant part of industry. It's not up there with defence, but it's there with food and beverage, for example, which is certainly a very important part of the economy as an employer and as a driver of change. And I then went to check on the Netherlands, because, you know, I live in the Netherlands quite a lot. So that's about 3.7. And yesterday what we were talking about was how difficult that is still to get that kind of data in a way that's useful and tangible, but maybe in Bulgaria too? Maybe. So it's an important part of not only of GDP, but it's an important part of a whole variety of aspects which affect other businesses. Why does it have a big and economic impact? Well, first of all, people pay taxes, right? And then many of you are paid to be here today. You probably have to be if I'm speaking. Then Art is a big employer, and entrepreneurship and startups are characterized the whole industry. There are very many people in our sector who work for themselves. The second one was innovation and competitiveness, and my background in industry, I take this very seriously indeed. This is about sharing knowledge across sectors. It's about collaboration. It's about motivation. It's about purpose. It's about vision. Hang on, that sounds like a talk about art. That's how you build a successful company. Successful companies today are not built by robots. Robots help. The thing that makes the money is the vision and diverse, purpose-led people driving for a clearly described goal. Now, you really need humans in that mix, and best of all, you need creative humans who want to work with other people, explore how they think. They want new ideas. They want to challenge new ideas. I can give you a really nasty conversation in private at the moment about how the fact that I think art is filled with dogma at the moment. It's only okay to do art about some things. You know, as a climate change activist and advocate, I know that there are some people who find my views very difficult to accept, but it is actually, in the art community, a dominant paradigm. I still think we need to embrace all areas of thought and all cultures in art. And that breadth, well, I went to a great show just before this, where it's a curators and an artist's online platform where they've left space to do just that, to have a go at having these conversations. And it's through people in the art world making things like that happen that industry just copies it. It inhales all the good ideas. I told you that I have a digital avatar. Wonky has become, without me realizing it, in 4 months, a massive project in the difference between the authentic and AI. And when you follow him on Instagram, which I know you're going to do, and I'm thrilled that you'll join me there, you'll see that Wonky exists for real, but he also exists in AI. And part of his charm, and part of his charm to my massive Chinese audience on WeChat, which is about 18 times bigger than Insta, is the fact that they know he exists. They know he's here. They know he's sitting rather uncomfortably looking at you today. So in the digital realm and the digital creativity I used to fix the problem of servicing wind turbine blades at sea, instead of sending people in boats and sending them up a rope to clean them up, we did it all with virtual reality. But the companies that created that virtual environment were fantastically creative. So technical development and digital engagement, well, where better to experiment than the art sector? Where better to experiment than with artists who are driven to do nothing but take our imaginations to places we've never been before? I'm here today as a, well, very grateful guest of amazing people who devote themselves to trying to develop art as an international and cultural export. And we do that in the absolute knowledge that soft power is a force in its own right. And when I use the term soft power, you remember that young fellow who was standing in the White House talking about international trade. It's critically important that we understand that there are other ways of getting things done than sending in guns and tanks and bombs. You can get a fantastic amount done with a conversation. At the Institute yesterday, I saw this beautiful, beautiful exhibition of dresses by Turkish artists. I liked it a lot because it's all from recycled materials. And I like the way artists are playing with recycled materials and thinking about the whole life of their artwork. But I also like the fact that it's a great way for Turkey and Bulgaria to have a nice conversation and to develop the friendship. I really credit you with this. I know all countries do it, but not everybody does it well, and not everybody means it as much as you do. So it's a privilege to have been there. Regional and local development. On the regional level, I think I'm very much in favor of regional arts organizations because I think they localize better than national arts organizations, and I think that you can generally, if you're an entrepreneur, you can do business better, or travel to the local capital rather than the national capital. And you don't have to be such a big fish to get things done. But there is a big factor with regional and local development. If you put a big artwork in a region, you can change the place. I wonder if any of you have ever seen a picture of Anthony Gormley's Angel of the North. Have you ever seen the Angel of the North? I'll act it for you. Right? It's massive. It's absolutely huge. It's even on its own private hill. I didn't include a picture of it, because I just want you to have the idea of it. But as a result of the Angel of the North, it's made out of steel, which is what they made in the North. It's where they built ships in the North in steel. It's a proud working person, but the whole thing is a symbol just of, it says so much. Every person who passes that sculpture on that road knows that they've arrived in the north of England. And this was also true, and partly the reason we experimented with that project in Rotterdam, to put pretty things that were in good condition from recycled material, from a new and evolving industry among the public, and allow them to experiment with how they reacted and behaved with it. So I think this word of regional and local development, it is about placemaking. It's more than tourism, it's placemaking. I put on here human capital and skills. Well, we don't need to talk too much about it. It's self-evident that we nurture diverse creative talent and it finds places to fit. If you want somebody running your advertising, you want somebody from every country where you operate. You don't just want one person. The most famous brand story of that kind is the guy from Coca-Cola who said, we are having a global strategy and we are going to win the world of fizzy drinks. And he said, I reveal to you today, my colleagues, the new strapline for Coca-Cola. It says, Coke adds life. Huge applause. Hooray. Coke will win. Pepsi is over. And they entered the Chinese market with this fantastic slogan and discovered it meant, Coke brings your relatives back from the dead. It's just not that refreshing feeling that you want from a fizzy drink. So I say to you that diversity and talent development are as important in business as they are in art, but they are really vital assets that are created by art activity. The gentleman who runs the science park made a remark at the speeches last night. It was a bit loud, so if I got him wrong, I apologize. He was talking about STEM, which is the way we bring more, particularly young female people, into science, technical, and engineering careers, something I'm very passionate about as a feminist, I'm passionate about it as a father, I'm passionate about it as somebody who's worked in industry. And he mentioned a new evolution, which I'd never heard, which was STEAM. The idea that we should add science, technology, engineering, and arts into that magical program that affects young people early on. I couldn't agree more with this. So the last one I put on the list, because I tried to make it as concise as possible, was inclusion and community cohesion. If you watch the way people behave around art, particularly if it's art that people find naturally appealing, if you watch the way people behave around Wonky, everybody's having fun. They seem to want to stroke him, they seem to want to play, they like to be friends with him. And I've seen some wonderful works of art that do this. There's a great example, actually, on the rather cold riverside location of the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao. You've all been there, right? Or if you haven't, please go. But the coons in front of that is a massive chia pet in flowers. And it's just a beautiful, big thing that makes you think, I'm here. You know, there's a Frank Gehry building and a big toy dog. What more could you want? It just makes you feel great. And my New York experience really, really drove that into me. The last thing I looked at was cultural identity and heritage. And I don't really want to talk about old art because there's loads of brilliant people who know all about old art. And I love old art, older the better, but really my whole world is new art. I would say to you that contemporary art is actually about new heritage. Look at the artists who were in the show last year. And you'll see that some of them have gone on to be bought by collectors, gone into museums, they've gone to tell their stories, and they've become new heritage. So we don't need to be long distant from a particular work of art and its story before it becomes an item of heritage informing the future. I did actually not use my computer for this piece of research, and I did another slide, but I'm not going to use the slide because I don't really like the picture. So I'm going to flick by it and you can say, I can understand why you didn't like the picture. But I talked to one gallerist in Amsterdam, and the reason I did is Ron Mandos Gallery is, well, it's not, there are some very good galleries in Amsterdam, but Ron Mandos has a vibe, and it's typically breaking all sorts of contemporary artists. It has a fantastic young graduates program, and they're cool. So I sat down with Sheila, the director, and said, could you please give me something that you would say about the experience of working in a gallery and the impact an individual gallery has on the environment around it. And she said two things I just want to share with you. I made a list of all the jobs in a gallery. And then she said, yeah, but you've missed out the gallery register, the consignments, the whereabouts and the movement of stock, all the logistics around that, the installation for clients that we do in their houses and in their premises, and the whole parade that goes to coming to shows like this. There's an image of designer clothes and champagne receptions like last night, which is concealing a reality which I truly respect of crates, paperwork, heavy lifting, invoices, taxes, and trying to get white walls covered with something pretty. So I truly understand that this creates all sorts of work. And I marvel at your achievements in doing this, how you travel around the world doing this, respect throughout. The second thing Sheila said, which I think I must share, is she described that how in their gallery, part of the reason for their success is that they invest in creating a meaningful sense of teamwork with everyone who's affected or has contact with the gallery. So suppliers, hospitality people, shippers, technicians. And she makes sure that they sit together and they just occasionally simply share their lunch together to kind of make it all work. To change the context in which they have their conversations. And there are two things that came from that. One is people are really at the core of this industry. The second thing is the feelers, the sort of tentacles of the industry go out into the business world in the communities where galleries operate and affect so many other things. People come from airports, visitors arrive and stay at hotels. I don't need to give you this equation. I can't do this without mentioning sustainability because I'm closely linked to sustainability. The two main arguments for me are that in art, sustainability has become already an important subject for artists in its own right. But I think the industry has a good deal of catching up to do, actually, in the way it operates, in its sourcing, in managing events, in circularity, in reducing impact and recycling, and in highlighting what others do. Sorry, that's that ugly slide I missed. I'm not going to share it anymore. So I wanted to just do this using a work of art. It's my favorite work of art by an artist addressing sustainability. It's the work of somebody I reserved the word genius for. His name is John Halpin. He's an artist who merits a Google. He was a peer of Joseph Beuys. Some of you will know Joseph Beuys. Is such an important art theorist as well as an artist himself. And John's all about art which is social engagement and positive action. He's principally a filmmaker and a performance artist and a very devoted Buddhist. But this is just so cool, right? He's come up with a really cheap tourist souvenir. I mean, the cheapest, probably made in China, tourist souvenir that he can get of Washington, D.C., the capital of his own country. And when you shake it, it doesn't snow. It's full of soot. So soot falls all the way down on the White House and on the Capitol. And it sort of talks about perhaps current US government policy on the environment. I'm not going to say any more about any of that. But I do love the way art can take us to new realms in terms of thinking about sustainability and connecting the dots on the subject. I mean, sustainability. Who's going to wear a T-shirt with the word sustainability on it? Okay, let's go to a gig and see the sustainables they're on tonight. It's such a dreadful word, but it's vital to our existence on this planet that we change the way we use our resources. So, hey, I'll stop preaching. Last piece on business. Entrepreneurs. I mentioned that I'm an entrepreneur. I have learned that all artists are entrepreneurs by definition. In my experience, they have no training for this. They have to raise funds. They have to support themselves to work. They have to pay for materials to publicize themselves. Many are completely clueless about managing contracts. Their financial affairs, they don't have financial affairs. Intellectual property, sorry, somebody I know told me that you can't do this or you can do that. But artists also have to eat to give us all these gifts they bring, all the benefits they bring. So I'm advocating, and I just started today, so it's news, the teaching of the business of art in every arts institution to prepare these brave new talents for some of the ugly and practical realities of what's ahead of them. You don't get it at art school. I did a foundation year and 4 years in art college in 2 different countries. Nobody ever mentioned tax. It's just the most extraordinary thing. I have a suggestion. I think it's events like this here in Sofia, events like this art fair actually, where you've got lots of galleries in the same place, lots of clever people with lots of experience in the art sector, and quite a few artists who we'd all like to come along and see all the effort you put in. Could we not organize a seminar or a workshop in one of these kinds of sessions where we actually create a course for them and we create a modular online course and we capture the feedback and the comments from all the brilliant and experienced gallerists so that they can do some of this and learn it online wherever they are. Presuming they speak English, we can even do it in AI subtitles so they learn it all wrong. But we can do something about it. So I'm very encouraged to do this. I think I might invent it. And if somebody will let me do it, I might start. Right, I'm going to finish off the show with a little bit on art collecting and what I meant by the unbearable passion. So unbearable passion means highs and lows. And you'll get an insight into which things I like and why I like them at the same time. So this is Little Heart in a Landscape by the genius, which is Jim Dine. And it's the most beautiful etching you could possibly imagine of a birchwood. And it has, of course, the signature Jim Dine heart in front of it. If it wasn't a heart, it would probably be a bathrobe. And if it wasn't a bathrobe, it would be a spanner or a screwdriver. Anyway, that's what Jim does. That's his shtick, and he's brilliant at it. It graces my home, and I love it dearly. I bought it sight unseen through Bonhams. And sometimes I get a specialist to look for me, but if I really know the piece and I know what's been on the market, sometimes I'll take a bit of a risk. I can reframe it. Looks okay. So this one arrived in the post, and then I turned it round, and I've got this marvelous bit of provenance on the back. Jim and his wife had actually given it as a gift to Selma and Derek from Janie and Jim, 1996. So that's a happy moment in the world of collecting, the happy serendipity of you're not quite sure what's in the packet. Questions from collectors that I took during the summer. What is your most valuable work of art? In fact, a young curator who was here a few moments ago asked me that question before the show. And it's really along the same lines as who is your favorite artist. You know, if we went around the room asking that question, it would take an hour, wouldn't it? But I used the under your arm test. So which is the one when the house catches fire that you're going to stick under your arm and run out of the house? And this work is by a brilliant, brilliant talent. I so respect what she does. She went to St Martin's College of Art in London. When she did this piece, she was 6.5, and it's a portrait of me. And I think I see, I don't know you can make your own minds up, but I see Lucian Freud there in those flesh tones. I see a little bit of Bacon-esque brushwork and those wonderful color combinations. And my eyes aren't quite that green and vicious, but, you know, I still think that in the event of a fire, there is a Picasso downstairs, there is a Roy Lichtenstein downstairs, there are things that have a price on them, but there's no price like the thing you love. Ha. As a collector, remember that I was only identified as a collector in 2020, and I hadn't really thought about being one until that point, but I definitely am one now. What's your direction? What's your strategy? And I think that's cool. I really love it when I hear other collectors talking about having a strategy. And recently I was in Sotheby's for a week at the Paulina Capides sale of surrealism. I came away, the whole world went surrealism in my eyes. It was a thing, but she certainly had a strategy. She knew them all, she bought them all. The woman was brilliant. If you're married to a Greek shipping magnate, it's easier to be brilliant than if you make it up. But so anyway, if I have a destination, it's to die in a white room, holding the hands of those who love me most in front of one of these, a Mark Rothko. So at some point, I'm going to deaccession the whole lot. And if I'm lucky enough, I'm about 3/4 of a Rothko through it, and maybe I can get just to that, an unframed smaller number by the time I finally croak. Let's hope I live long and prosper. Thanks for that. Wow. Okay, the ups and the downs, the unreasonable passion. I need a Jasper Johns. Robert Rauschenberg and Jasper Johns are the hippest two heroes in my art life. I would walk around Christopher Street and Bleecker Street in New York looking for the actual studio they shared. They were, of course, lovers for a period of time and cohabited and very, very competitive. And this piece of work is from the Four Seasons series, which Johns completed after that. But in this piece, it contains everything you ever will see in a Johns. There's the American flag, we all know. There's Mona Lisa. There's the amazing sweeping arm. There's the stars. There's the split in the middle, which gives you two parts of the picture plane. There's strange wooden Japanese, beautiful referential Japanese elements of wood in there. And there's a shady figure on the right who is the teenage son of the director of contemporary prints at Sotheby's at that time, and I actually met him. So I feel really connected to this piece. And affordable Johns. There's no such thing as an affordable Johns. You have to give a leg to buy a Jasper Johns. There's lots of Jasper Johns around that's okay, but most Jasper Johns is excellent, and therefore it commands a decent price. And it should, because it's great. So how do I buy one? Because I'm not married to a Greek shipping magnate. So I found through the gallery, I think it was Pace at the time, who was representing Johns for Prints, somebody I met at the drinks. I liked her. And I said, you used to work with Johns, you used to print with Johns. I can't believe it. Tell me stories, tell me everything you know. I want to know you more. Can I don't know, buy you lunch or something? And then about 3 weeks later, I got a call back through the gallery, Jodie Scherer, who was then head of prints at Pace, and she said, you met Susan on the drinks. I didn't know that you two were hanging out. I said, I didn't know either. She thinks she might have something for you, but you have to get down to the Lower East Side tonight. I'm at work, right? I'm saying, well, why? And she's saying, can you raise, $5 grand? I'm thinking, $5 grand, that's my holiday. That was so much money I couldn't imagine it. I didn't have it in anything that you would call ready money, but I went to the bank and I kind of blagged it. Brown envelope, taxi downtown, pouring with rain, standing in a corner, a really, really rough corner of the Lower East Side. I mean, if you ever listen to the Rolling Stones songs, Waiting for a Friend, it really was, at that time, street. And this lady puts her arm out of the door of a shop, hands me an envelope, and says, where's your envelope? And I have to hand my envelope back. Sorry, I got that the wrong way around. I had to hand my envelope in first, and then she pushes out a square brown envelope. And inside it was my Jasper Johns. Strange world, and you meet some very strange people as you get around there. But, needs must. If you've got to acquire something, you've got to acquire it. You get yourselves into these situations. Valentin Bakagiev, my first Bulgarian artist. Some of you may know Valentin, I hope you do. He's a lovely man, How do you buy art by an artist that you don't know all their work? Valentine works typically with organic materials, and he grows his own indigo. He's got sustainability not just in his practice, it's dyed on his fingers and toes. He's all blue a lot of the time. And I really love the guy. He also taught me a little bit about Bulgarian liqueurs, which is a lesson I'm very glad I learned before I came to Bulgaria for real. And having walked out of his very, very warm home 4 or 5 times on my knees because of Bulgarian liqueurs, Valentine said to me, you haven't bought any of my work yet. What is it? I thought, when we met, I just felt like we were together somehow and that we would be connected through art. And my wife and I were kind of a little bit embarrassed because we do know him quite well, and we actually hadn't bought any of his art. And it's because I'm slightly concerned about the durability of it and how easy indigo printed maize, even in very complicated constructions, how it would last. And I'm not a museum, so I don't have the resources of a conservator. So he said, I said, what have you got? Have you got anything else? And then he flipped through a portfolio and produced this fabulous print. It's a tree of life filled with birds which are drawn. He's very good at drawing. He draws beautifully. He's made a beautiful screen print. It's just, in fact, the slide does not do this justice. It's a really stunning, stunning, stunning image. And there it was, and I bought it on the spot. So sometimes you have to kind of, understand that the artist isn't in the retail industry before you really get to the idea that they might have something that's good for you and good for your collection. I'm very proud of it. It was an absolute smash hit at the show, actually. And this is by presently, in my view, the greatest living female artist. Now, why do I make that statement? It's because I've seen her work since the dawn of time. I came back to Europe just at the time the YBAs were making it. I own Hearst, I own OP, I own a whole bunch of different YBAs doing different things, but she is, for me, she has a universal truth. And why does she have a universal truth? It's because there is nothing between you and Tracy in any work you ever see by her. Last year she had a show of her new paintings at the White Cube Gallery in Bermondsey in London, and I went 4 times because it's visceral. It's almost as though she is making herself entirely on display for you, and it is just shocking beyond words. But her power and what she's doing in Margate with young artists on the south coast, it's her old hometown, is just beyond belief. So this is just one of a series of prints that I own by her. I like it because I love the way she draws. She also draws birds, beautiful birds like Valentine. And the reason I put it up there is because it's a beautiful print, but I bought it directly from her on the day it was issued. It cost peanuts. I mean, you can still buy great art for, everybody uses the cup of coffee analogy, but you can buy it for a cup of coffee. I mean, if I'd given up I don't buy lots of coffee, but let's say I bought, €7 a day or something is the kind of coffee budget of the typical millennial. Well, I got that in 200 days. And you can buy it. It's an absolute virgin print. Amazing. Wow. Got to show you this. This is about conversations, right? When you own art as a collector, you stop seeing it. When I go to the Rijksmuseum, I go straight to the Nachtwacht and the Vermeers, and I love them for a bit, and then I go and see some other things. But in your own home, it sort of stays where it is, unless it moves. And because I had a show in the summer, it all moved. And then it came back. And the piece on your left is by a brilliant Austrian artist called Margaret Widmer. She's global and she's fantastic. She's a performance artist, a videographer. Go and see her stuff, look her up, get to do her Salon d'Amour. You read poetry in mad masks, in hushed tones. I had to read John Cage's love letters to Merce Cunningham, to a brilliant artist in a red mask in front of me. Margaret Widmer, massive hero. And then next to her is Paul Boateng, who's just, Derek Boateng. Paul Boateng is a British politician, sorry. Derek Boateng, who is Derek Afuso Boateng, who comes from Ghana. He's an iPhone photographer, but his works are just filled with delight and magic and smiles and music, and they light up everywhere they go, and he's hot as hell. He's just signed for MT Art in London, and, well, we can have a long conversation about MT Art another time, but that is a trend, which is the art. The end of the gallery, well, I'm seeing agencies all over the place now. Anyway, brilliant show, nice conversation, changes the way you look. Red Lamp. Roy Lichtenstein. I mentioned him before, how I love Roy. I love everything. When I was a kid, I used to go to the National Gallery and draw Wham, because it had aeroplanes and it was so cool. But this is Little Red Lamp, and it was affordable, Roy. And I thought, I know I'm going to own this piece. I know. I'm going to an auction. I bid on it 20 times at auction, more than I can count. And I never got it. And then finally, we came to online auctions. Oh, God. What a terrible invention, online auctions. Sotheby's used to smell of Chanel and cigars and gorgeous people. And now it's your phone and you're bashing away at the dot trying to buy something horrible. I owned this piece until 10 seconds or something before the end of the auction. Somebody put in a higher bid and it wouldn't take my bid, and so I still don't have Red Lamp, and my heart was broken. How I love Roy Lichtenstein. Jeff Koons. I bid in an auction in LA for an amazing deal on a Jeff Koons. No one had spotted it in the whole art world. It was about $30,000 for a Jeff Koons Balloon Dog original. I checked it all out. I'm totally with it. I'm on the online auction. I hadn't actually been to LA to check this out. I had somebody who was there check it out. And then I get a call from the gallery saying it's 3 minutes until the end of this auction. I just have to let you know that you really cover the fact that your shipping costs are going to be 3 times the price that you're paying for the artwork. I'm saying, what do you mean? I could travel there myself and put it under my arm for that kind of money. And he said, well, it's 3 meters long. Just the legs, 3 meters long. The body's 3 meters long. I was buying the wrong balloon dog. And that next 5 minutes of my life, while my bid stayed where it was, and I'm thinking, storage costs in LA, visas and shipping, and I had to tell my wife that I'd done this. And I previously ordered a work of art which blocked the hallway for a year. She's sensitive, but very supportive of my art antics. I'm very proud to say I missed buying the huge Jeff Koons balloon dog, even though I probably would have made some money on it by now. But the fact is, check the dimensions, when you're buying offline. So this is the last part I wanted to touch on. I can't rewrite art history, but as a collector, I take this responsibility very seriously. I can't rewrite art history. There are more men than women in galleries, but in my collection, there will be 50-50 representation, and I will ensure that's the case. And of that 50% of female artists, at least half of that 50% will be emerging artists who could benefit from being in such a collection. And that will change. So look at this lineup: Julian Opie, Robert Longo, the photographer, Barbara, it's Elizabeth Frink, the brilliant British sculptor. I will end. Bridget Riley, Barbara Hepworth, Henry Moore, and here, Dilruba Tayfan, Turkish artist, brand new, just out of St. Martin's, brilliant. I can't tell you anything about the Toro Noir because I'm out of time, but I do just like to say, when I bought it, there was another print on the back. It was so old that it created a sun print. Is that a Picasso? Or ceci n'est pas un Picasso? Emily Bates, she's a British photographer. She works with the natural environment and is a princess of sustainability. But I just want to say that my wife had cancer in the summer. She got better. I'm amazed, but during this terrible, terrible summer of my broken foot and her cancer, Emily's beautiful portraits were in our house. And I wanted to say something about why to buy art. Buy art if it has presence. If its presence can help you or change you. Emily was there with us the whole time, and just by her benign presence, well, medical science is a brilliant thing, and that's what saved my wife's life. But the love and the wave of love that we served is represented for me and will always be represented for me in this work. So there we are. It's enough from me blabbing on. I have to mention the brilliant VIPs who came to our show. And this was my first contact with Bulgaria. I'm so grateful to you both for coming to see my show and for the fun we had with Wonky. Thank you for your attention. Lovely to meet you.
Maybe we have time for one question, perhaps, from the public. If there's one question.
Thank you so much for the presentation. So many interesting themes. For example, this what you're doing for the students and doing the art, like introduction to business for artists. That's a great thing. I think that's what we do at Follow Art as well, because the academies just simply don't cover it. So that's great. I just want to point that. But maybe coming back to the collecting and the thing that you mentioned in the beginning, how so many people are. They feel that there is this wall when they enter a gallery, and all this awkward feeling, and looking at the wonky. And so, have you seen or have you noticed any nice activities around, maybe from galleries or from other participants of the art industry, that would make this entrance for the new collectors and new buyers smoother, kind of like more welcoming, so that more people can find out what, like, the unbearable passion of collecting and what it actually can bring to them and what kind of joy it can give?
Yes, I had lots of visitors, and many of them were art clubs. And that's great, because then you've got supportive friends to take you and have a glass of wine afterwards and all of that. I just think it's something I commend all these wonderful exercises, and I commend all the galleries that do community outreach and schools that take kids to galleries. I love seeing kids in galleries. I hate it when I go into a gallery and people go, shh. I still feel that same way in front of a Mona Lisa. She's small, but she's cool if you can look past the cameras. I don't think there are any school trips to the Mona Lisa, actually, but anyway, wrong artwork. The answer is, I agree with you, but like we said earlier, when there's a nuance to this, I don't think we're really solving it. I don't think we've really grasped how to get people who are uncomfortable about the language of art, the liminality of its dynamics and its representation. These words are all many, many syllables. And they just want to say, that's a good work of art, and I like it. Upstairs there's a stick on 2 pieces of stone. I've got to talk to the artist, and I've really got to talk to him, so help me out here. I'm willing, but most people wouldn't be willing. So, contemporary art creates its own problems, and it's partly that, and it's partly something that we've got to find, isn't it? Yes. It's a formula. The questions I get on Wonky seem to tell me that we're not doing something when we explain art. Why would they talk to you and not to me? I don't know.